Life on a Plantation by Amy, Kelsey and Holly. Accommodation. Slaves. They lived in Slave Row in the plantations. The houses were poorly built and many had mud floors and no windows. There was very little or no furniture. They were very dirty and cold. Their beds were planks and pillows were sticks of wood. In each shack, 10 or 12 men, women and children toddled like cattle. Some had straw and rags on their beds, or that was the alternative to the planks. Rain and snow would blow through the cracks in the walls. It was truly terrible. White men. Not all plantation owners lived in big mansions. Most lived in small houses. In fact, some only lived in log cabins.
Work. The slaves were forced to work very hard and for long hours for their new masters. On huge farms called plantations, they would help to plant, look after and harvest crops. For example, sugar, cotton, tobacco and coffee, depending on where and when the slaves were working. It also depended on what time of year it was. For example, the cotton picking season began at the end of August. They had a rota that they had to keep to avoid punishment. A typical day of a slave was at 5:30 they had to go straight to the fields. They took their breakfast with them, then they'd work until 8 a.m. If you were late, you would be whipped. At 8 o'clock they'd stop for breakfast. At 8:30 they'd continue working. At 12 p.m. they rested and ate lunch. Later, at 2 p.m. they would start work again. At 6 p.m. they'd return to their huts. During the night they would, if it was the harvest season, work in the mill or boiling houses.
Rebellions, escapes and punishments. Rebellions would be brutally crushed, as the very idea of a slave revolt horrified the owners. In 1831, the Nat Turner revolt killed nearly 60 white people. Turner was caught and hanged, but the black people paid a terrible price for his revolt. Over 200 innocent black people were lynched, judged and put to death without a trial.
55 of his followers were executed. Some slaves resisted their masters in other ways, like stealing, destroying crops and tools. Others ran away and hid in woods and swamps. Others joined Indian tribes. One slave posted himself to the northern United States in a box where they could be helped out of the country. Music and celebrations. Slaves were sometimes allowed to organise dances, and sometimes at Christmas they held parties for them. Music was very important to the slaves because they showed how they felt about their lives. They used whatever they could find. One slave recalls how the horn of a buffalo was made into a flute. Weddings were a cause for celebration. Some slaves were allowed to get married in the big house, but many became man and wife by jumping over a broomstick. All slaves realised that their marriage would only last as long as their masters wanted it to last. They could sell or split them up at any time.
Life on a Plantation by Spike, aka Kelsey, Cardboard, aka Holly, and Box, aka Amy.